derived from the fundamental differences relying on what you alluded to, but just our differences because our system work autonomously, completely autonomously. When you drive a car in New York, when you rent a car in New York, do you have the impression that the car is of a lower safety level? When you buy a computer that is conforming or complying with US standards, you have the impression that the computer is less safe than the computer you buy in Europe. When you buy a pharmaceutical product in CVS or any pharmacy in the US, you have the impression the products are not of the same safety level. You don't. You don't. The safety, we feel very comfortable in a car, whether we are here, whether we are in Europe, whether we buy a pharmaceutical product approved by the FDA or approved by the EMEA in Europe. And same thing on manufactured products. So, and that's what we're looking at in practice. In cars, we're looking at specific differences that exist between the rules on bumpers, the rules on safety belts, the rules on lighting for vehicles, the rear bike mirrors. We're looking at these very down-to-earth, pragmatic things. You know, in the US, the mirror, when you drive, the mirrors on the side must be flat. In Europe, they must be curved so that you don't have what we call the dead angle. And so that when you move lane, you see whether or not there's someone, a bicycle or a car there, and then you don't do the move, and it protects bicycles and cyclists. Actually, I had the same problem. I had that problem personally a few months ago when I arrived, and I was driving in Washington. I shifted lanes, and I heard I was not driving quickly. I was 10 miles an hour. A cyclist that was passing by me was going quicker than I was on the right, and I didn't see it because the mirror didn't show it. So these are the kinds of things that we're looking at. Bottom-up, pragmatic, and we have regulators on both sides, American regulators and European regulators, who identify the areas where they feel confident or comfortable to explore regulatory convergence. And they also ask data and proof to companies and stakeholders to see, okay, the standards are different, but show me that the results on the ground are the same, so that we could explore regulatory equivalence on these standards. So that's how we deal with it. And there are areas where we say clearly, we're not going to change the rules. Take hormone beef. So in Europe, farmers cannot inject hormones in cattle so that they would grow quicker. That's just prohibited by law, and this is not going to change. Our rules on GMOs regulate very strictly GMOs, and there is a scientific assessment to authorize putting on the market of genetically modified organisms. These rules are not going to change. These rules are, you could say, embedded on our precautionary principle, but there and they will not be changed. So that's how we bridge these differences in cost-benefit analysis on the one side and rules where we rely on the precautionary principle when it applies. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Levy. Thank you so much. If anybody has questions, when you do ask questions, please introduce yourself so that we have an understanding of where the audience comes from. Thank you.
This one. I'm Fiorenzo Borghi. I'm the organizer, one of the organizers of Movimento 5 Stelle in meetup in the US. My question is, it looks, especially for Washington, it looks like that you are not worried about the TTIP and the TTP, that is basically the same things, but with Asia. But why they keep it so secret? And who is dealing with? I mean, should be for the people, but we don't know much about it. We have to discover information by looking into the internet and asking friends. So if it's so good for us, or if it doesn't create any danger, why is not more open. Who is the negotiator? Who are the negotiator, basically? Oh, and also
Thank
for
you.
Tiziana Beghini.
We have published 2 years ago a list of the negotiators. It's
Yeah.
publicly available if you look up on the website of the European Commission. The list of American negotiators is also publicly available on the website of USTR. These are government officials who are bound by the rules, all the rules of government officials, ethics, and all that. The issue of confidentiality and secrecy is an important one. The Commission has heard, and Commissioner Malmström, the Trade Commissioner, when she was heard to be nominated Trade Commissioner, made the commitment to increase transparency because she thought we have not been transparent enough. And we've decided to publish our negotiating text proposals, something we've never done before in bilateral trade negotiations. We have also explanatory notes translated in all European Union languages, explaining in everyday language what is it that it's behind, what is it that we are proposing or asking for in trade negotiations. But you do not manage to finish a negotiation if you do them in the open, in public. When you negotiate between trade unions and employers, when you negotiate between political parties to form a government, when you negotiate to finalize a law, there is a moment where you need confidentiality to be testing ideas in confidence. But then the result will be public for months before it's voted by the European Parliament and by national parliaments later. And so there will be ample opportunities for transparency, for public debates afterwards on the actual text, which is the result of the negotiations. We would very much welcome if the United States were to publish its own text proposals, but it's not part of their policy. They have a different way to consult the public and to inform the public, and they did not think it was adequate for the United States, in the interest of the United States, to publish their text proposals.
So, I appreciated your intervention, Mr. Levy, and I'd like to make some more remarks about transparency in principle. Transparency is a quite difficult word in Europe, you know. And about TTIP, we have a particularly transparency because we can know something. What we know is that negotiators are used to speak with the stakeholders, for example, and not with citizens, because in the case of Europe, we know that the Commission had more than 130 meetings with with stakeholders, sorry, but I think that it was 120 with big corporations and just 10 with ONGs, for example. And also about transparency, we have regularly meeting with the negotiators, with Ignacio Bercero from the Commission, for example, and we have a very generalist talk. We have some change of view, nothing particularly, but I can give you an example. For example, we are just dealing another free trade agreement with Japan, and we can meet regularly, the negotiators, and we have a completely different kind of feedback because we have more and more detailed report as we have in TTIP. TTIP, we can deny, is a complete secret treaty. We as MEP have less information than the functionary of the big companies. And I can say it for sure because we have access to confidential documents and papers that are without annex. But I know that people working, for example, in big company have this annex. So, it is very difficult for us to have the real data. You speak about a language that everybody may understand. I appreciate that for citizens, but we have to understand that we, as a member of the parliament, we have to read the documents that we are done to vote. That it's really important for us not to have a way, just a way to speak, but we have to know the real details on which we are then asked to vote, first of all. I would like to come back to the previous topic that Mr. I don't know your name, sorry, asked about the harmonization of the two different systems based on the science approach in the US and the precautionary principle in the EU. I'm not here to say which is the best. I'm just here to say that the systems are quite different. I'm not a politician as a profession. I'm an entrepreneur. I've been working for more than 20 years in Italian enterprises, and I can speak like a person that is really in the fact. I know how we work. I know how we work with international trade, and I can say that it is impossible to harmonize these two systems completely different just by saying that it is possible. But because this is the answer I received, for example, asking about the pharmaceutical chapter and how to harmonize two so different systems, the answer was just it's possible. So I want to say that we have some number, for example. In the European countries, about cosmetics, for example, we have more than 1,300 components that are forbidden in Europe. And we have more than 250 which are strict regulated. And in the United States, it seems to me that just 11, and not in every state of the United States, are forbidden as in the European Union. So the question is how we can harmonize the cosmetics sector, which is so different. How can a company make his production process to satisfy two requirements so different? So it is very easy to say we can do it, but the question is how? How without avoiding the problems that we are concerned about for safety and for the customer protection? This is the really topic we are answering every day to the Commission. And I'm sorry, but we never have a quite right answer.
Okay, I think Mr. Levine, if you want to give a short answer, brief answer, then we'll go on to the next question.
Okay, I'd like to react. One, members of parliament have access to text that nobody else has access to except member states officials. It's not exact to say that companies have access to text that members of the European Parliament do not have access to. It's the other way around. Second, on harmonization, we will not harmonize rules on cosmetics, for example. I don't know why Mrs. Begin is taking this example. I was talking about cars in areas where there are no standards, that we would look for opportunities to have the same standards on both sides, and you can call that harmonization in areas where there are no standards. But TTIP will not be a big harmonization exercise. Our differences are too big. I completely agree with you. Also, cosmetics here, beyond the issue of substances, which you correctly highlighted, this issue, cosmetics here are regulated as pharmaceutical products, actually are subject to a much stricter regulatory regime, subject to the Federal Drug Administration process, which is absolutely not the case in Europe, where most cosmetic products, you buy them freely, in shops and pharmacies, but they have to comply with the rules on substances, which are stricter on our side. But I fully agree with you, harmonization is not on the menu for cosmetics.
Thank you, Mr.
And the
Levy.
same on pharmaceuticals, by the way. The rules to put new pharmaceutical products on the market are two different. What we are looking at is, for the moment, is there are globally agreed or harmonized, if you want, standards for pharmaceutical companies to comply with when they manufacture pharmaceutical products. And so these are called the good manufacturing practices. And inspectors on both sides visit pharmaceutical companies that sell products on both markets. And that is a cost. And as I said, it's a particular cost to smaller pharmaceutical companies on both sides, but also in Europe, that they have to comply with two sets of visits, that have to keep two sets of records and all that. We're not talking about harmonizing the rules. We're simply looking at making sure if one inspector visits and he's trusted by his colleague on the other side of the Atlantic, well, his report will be accepted by the authority on the other side. So it's going to be so that regulatory authorities can focus on riskier sources to protect their own consumers and patients in pharmaceutical products. That's what we're looking at.
Thank you, Mr. Levy. I appreciate very much your reply, which is obviously very much an added value for our understanding of how you are, representing us citizens, and also our representative in the European Parliament, clearly, as one of the negotiators for the EU's interests. Now, I pass the word to Mr. Akil from the EU Association.
Yeah, hello, good afternoon, and thank you for joining us again. My name is Akil Haider, and I'm a member of the EU Association, which is one of the organizers of this event. I'm going to ask a few questions that were received by email, and we would like to maybe have you both touch on it. Maybe you've already touched on some of those, but they're more high level. The first question is, what is the role of the members of the European Parliament in the trade agreement? The second question, and I'm going to put all the questions so you can have the time to answer them as you like, in the order you like. The second question is, what is the state of the current negotiations of TIP? And the final one is, who will eventually vote and ratify the agreement at the end? So those are the three questions we received from the internet. Thank you so much. I'll let you answer.
So I try to remember all the questions. Yeah, thank you very much. Okay. So the role of the European Parliament. The negotiations are followed by the Commission. But we have a rule, and we are now making a resolution in the European Parliament giving our lines to the Commission. And as Mrs. Arena told before, it is not easy to find a position in the European Parliament. There are many issues which are not clear. The different groups have different position, but we are ready to vote on next 10th June, and then we will have a position as Parliament. What does it mean? That this is the position that the Parliament say to have about these negotiators. It is not given that Commission will follow our suggestion. They can go further alone and quite independent. But we have to ratify the treaty once it will be ready. European Union need our approbation. So we have to vote the final text, and so we can suppose that if we give an orientation, a direction to be followed to the commission by the Commission, and they don't follow our red line, for example, our principle, we are not disposed to avoid. It may be also possible that we don't accept it. I'm not sure that it will be the case, but it can happen. It may happen. Then we also dispute about the possibility that each member state has to give the approbation to the approval to the treaty once it is complete. Second question was about.
Sure. The second question was in regard to the current state of the negotiation of the treaty.
Yeah, so this is to maybe Mr. Levy can give more information because before you told us that the only chapter is about manufacture, but we have a big debate instead in Europe and in the European Parliament with also Ignacio Bercero about the other chapter, about chemical chapter, about cosmetic chapter, about pharmaceutical chapter. It is very strange that he answered to our question and he tried to cover our concern. If you are not treating these issues, it's very strange to me, to her, that it is not the case to speak about that issues. So maybe you have more information about me, about the state of play, because we have different information about that.
Yeah, thank you. You can go ahead, Mr. Levy.
Well, where are we in the negotiations? We have had, first of all, 9 rounds of negotiations. These are kind of gatherings of the entire negotiating teams. We are divided in 20-25 working groups, and the working groups meet separately during these weeks of negotiations. If you look at TTIP as a bridge with 3 pillars, you have a first pillar, which is market access, which is about increasing opportunities for companies to sell products on the other side and services. Second pillar is regulatory convergence, and third pillar is kind of rules. In the first pillar, market access, we have exchanged offers on tariffs, first initial offers on tariffs, on services, and we will table revised offers on services before the summer. On public procurement, we've had exploratory conversations, discussed text, but not market access offers. And that's the classical part of a free trade agreement. And we still have some way to go there before we arrive at what we would call kind of the end game. We should keep in mind that the United States does not have, for the moment, trade promotion authority. The Congress has not given the Obama administration this authority to negotiate trade agreement. The Senate has voted a bill giving authority to the president, but the House hasn't yet and will probably take it in the coming weeks. So this is also one of the reasons why negotiations, in a way, have kind of slowed down in the last months because of the lack of trade promotion authority, and because then the United States government wants to first conclude the Trans-Pacific negotiations. If you look at the second pillar on regulatory convergence, we are looking at rules that would apply across the board horizontally, for example, to make sure that regulators talk to each other in a structured manner before adopting regulations, so that they would reduce unnecessary differences to the minimum. We're looking at, indeed, a number of sectors: cosmetics, pharmaceuticals, cars, chemicals, ICT, engineering, pesticides, and I'm forgetting 1 or 2. Medical devices is also where we have regulators on both sides looking at what is possible. And these persons have as first mandate to protect and achieve their public policy objectives, and not to increase trade. So these people are there and leading the show in a way, and they are exploring what is possible in some areas where further. I would say cars is an area where we've made good progress. Pharmaceutical sector is also an area where these issue of inspections we've made good progress. But it's a work that takes a lot of time and very close examination by regulators on both sides. So that work is ongoing. And in the third pillar on rules, it's a more diverse set of provisions that we're looking at. We're talking labor and environment, or sustainable development, which is important from our perspective. We're talking about energy, because we want to have access to energy raw materials. We think there should be free trade in these products. talking about intellectual property rights, customs and trade facilitation to facilitate the life of companies, and again, more the life of small companies than the life of big companies which have the money to have people either internally or the experts or consultants to facilitate procedures at customs, looking at subsidies and competition and state-owned enterprises and small and medium enterprises. So in these all areas, we've exchanged text. In some we have not yet, like sustainable development, we have not yet exchanged text, or intellectual property rights, we haven't yet. My guess is that by the summer or maybe the next round, we will have exchanged text. And then we have to work to bring those texts closer and closer to each other. And that will be a work that has started already and will accelerate in the coming months. And we hope that we will be able to conclude with the current Obama administration, which has launched these negotiations. But time is in a way running short if Trade Promotion Authority is not granted to the administration and if TPP is not concluded quickly. That's where we are. And it's normal for negotiations of this size to last more than 2 years. I mean, we've never concluded an agreement of such an importance. And if you look at our agreement with Canada, it took 5 years. The Trans-Pacific Agreement, they've been negotiating at least 7 years. Under President Obama 5 years. So these agreements take time to negotiate because we're looking at a very broad area of topics like I hope I have managed to get across.
Thank you so much, Mr. Levine. We appreciate your contribution. And I would like to ask the public if there is more questions. Please introduce yourself and then, yes, please. Sure. Yes, go ahead.
Hi, my name is Daniel Chan. I am a concerned citizen. To me, the competition and trade are one and one. You can't separate one from the other. So when I hear this, I oftentimes just think about how it practically applies. And you have a series of negotiations between these multinational companies that are held, and when you have disputes with the TPP or the TTIP nations, you can have these same multinational companies enforce essentially what they can essentially claim as their right, their patent right, copyright infringement, or whatever issues that may come up. They're essentially exerting their own influence, if you will. So to me, that actually is a decrease in competition because you're giving so much power to the negotiators in this case, in the ones involved in this deal, these two deals. And so I don't see how that would increase the competition, as some of the proponents say. In fact, if you look back in history, NAFTA and CAFTA, you got some of our senators, Markey recently said there's only one main American sneaker manufacturer, and that's New Balance, and they're holding it by a very thin thread. You take Sanders, Bernie Sanders, our candidate right now, and he also said with NAFTA, we in fact closed something like 6,000 manufacturers. Okay, so when you have these, especially with the TPP, you got these countries that are clearly per capita, their income is clearly lower than us. When you look in terms of a corporation, a multinational corporation, you would love to offset your balance sheet in a way that would favor you, and you would naturally go to countries that would have an advantage in terms of manufacturing. Okay, so there's clearly some concern for outsourcing here.
Close up, please. It's a long question.
Oh, okay. So my question really is, how will this really improve competition? I mean, can you give me an example of how that would increase competition?
Yeah, please. Either one of the panelists can reply, I guess.
Probably for
Okay.
Mr.
So first
Levine,
of all,
but, yeah.
Yes. First of all, I have to clear that my position is that for the future, we have to change completely the paradigm. We can't speak always about competition. I stated because I think that we have to stop with this challenge between someone who wins and someone who loses. Because till we have winner and loser, we will always have somebody who isn't satisfied. I think that the future for our next generation is to change the way of life, not only in the life, but also in trade. We have to think about convergence, to think a better life, a better trade for everybody. So I know it's very difficult for business. I come from business, and business is I win market share, and if I win market share, I grow. But it's natural. I have to make competition. So I understand that it is very difficult to change the way of imagine how to grow, how to better live without growing, for example. Because we can also imagine to have a better life without growing at any cost. This is how we can also imagine to live. I don't think that free trade agreement in general can ensure better competition. I think that we are now dealing with two different industrial systems, which is American from one side and European for the other side, which are really, really different. You know, in the European Union, we have more than 90% of companies which are small and medium enterprises. But what does it mean? Small and medium enterprises in Europe are not the same than in the US. Most of our companies have less than 100 employers. You know, most of our companies have less than 15 employers. We have a lot of micro enterprise. So, what is competition between a micro enterprise and the big companies with more than 2,000 or 3,000 of people working in it? The only solution is that, as they can afford the challenge, we are now dealing to destroy small and medium enterprise and make more place for the biggest one. Because two markets, which are now not so different, we have not two different markets that were put together, and it is not a magician that we put out as something new. We are just putting together two markets, and we don't discover anything new. So we have just one market. And if you want to grow, there's not, also the impact assessment say that there will not grow in GDP grow. What will happen is just to change the market share. This is what will change. I don't know if this is a good result for competition. I can't say that. What it will happen, I'm sure, that we will change the market share. And it is impossible to say that the small and medium enterprise will gain or big companies will gain. I don't know what will happen, but for sure, we don't invent anything new. We will have a big market with different equilibriums. That's all.
Thank you so much to Mrs. Begin. Mr. Levine, I mean, I think some of the concern that we have in Europe indeed are the small and medium companies might be a little bit less competitive vis-a-vis the much larger companies that are on this side of the Atlantic. So you can give us some input on that. It would be very appreciated. Thank you.
Well, first of all, I'd like to come back on the issue of cosmetics, because I just took up the paper which is available on the internet since February of the European Commission. It doesn't talk about harmonization. Page 13, what we do on cosmetics. It's the title of the document, if you are interested to read what we've published, is TTIP and Regulation. TTIP and Regulation, an overview. So if you want to know what is it that we're actually trying to do, and you want to read the details, it's there. We don't talk about harmonization in cosmetics. I just wanted to double check in what we've published a few months ago. On the opening markets and barriers. And when you change the level of protection in a way that, for example, on tariffs, you have more competition from those exports that are more competitive. That is just the nature of a trade agreement. And so I don't understand why you would say it doesn't bring more competition, because if it were not, I would not understand why certain sectors that are protected by high tariff barriers would fight to keep those barriers if a trade agreement would not bring more competition. I mean, take agricultural products where certain products, we are more competitive. We've reformed the dairy market, for example, and the dairy quotas will disappear in a year or two. Sugar is, or have disappeared. I forgot if dairy has disappeared and sugar will disappear. So there are sectors where the European Union agriculture is actually very competitive. And I would be very surprised if the United States would eliminate the tariff on the date of entry into force in these products. And the same is true on our side for certain meat products, beef, pork, or chicken, where it's cheaper to produce beef or chicken or pork in a number of states in the United States, and that would bring more competition. So I think if you open trade, you bring more competition. It's not that you restrict competition. I think you bring more competition, and that's why in these models, and if you look at how certain free trade agreements have been implemented, exports do increase, the markets increase, the markets are not fixed, and prices go down, and it kind of accelerates change. I think it would be illusory to think that nobody loses from change. I think when you look at how our societies have evolved the last 100 years, you see some people who've won, some people who've lost. And I think where our societies have managed to modernize is to make sure that the losers can get attention, get the social protection that they need, the education, and so that they can get a chance to win again. So a trade agreement accelerates change, and there are winners and there are losers, and it's up to the systems on both sides, beyond the way we address these challenges in the trade agreement itself, to handle this. But change occurs regardless of a trade agreement or not.
Thank you so much, Mr. Levy. I think we will have one or two more questions before we end today's section. I'll pass the word to the gentleman down there.
Thank you for having me. I'm Jeremiah Salia. I'm from Sierra Leone, West Africa. I have a series of basically questions related to one, environmental safety. I think this issue of international trade or free trade is actually to benefit the citizenry, but it's like much is not like done to see how the citizens are being, what they benefit, what they stand to benefit. And if you look at the issue of the internet, Mr. Levy was talking about, looking at in Africa, like my own country, how many citizens actually have access to internet to actually get into those things to get information? It's like to popularize this issue, you need to work with the civil society, like our organizations, to make sure that the people stand to benefit, to understand what actually the negotiation is actually about. And most of these multinational companies, they are only negotiating with the politicians. They forget about the citizen. And the citizen, actually, they don't stand to benefit. So what mechanisms are you actually going to put in place to make sure that most of these issues discussed are being popularized for the people to understand it?
Well, that's why we have the members of parliament to talk on behalf of the people. So I guess Tiziana could give some comments on that.
So I thank you very much for your question. Actually, I'm part of a movement in Italy which make of the transparency and the talk with citizens the topic of our existence. We are not a member of the parliament. We don't call us, for example, we say in Italian, we say honorable member. We don't want that. We are just a citizen. We are spokesmen and spokeswomen that bring the voice of the citizen to the institutions. This is our role in our essence. About your question, how to inform, this is a good question, you know, because I'm coming from Italy. Italy is now at the 73rd place in the world for press freedom, you know, less than in some, for example, African country. And this is the reason why we don't speak about anything in Italy which is not wanted by government. And it is strange to say in this period, but it's so. This is our commitment now. I'm speaking about TTIP and this particular issue that we deal every day in the European Parliament to the people. The only way to inform